I've had a little bit of a clean up in here just because things were getting messy and because I wanted to pull the Riley forwards a bit so I can get access to the very back of the chassis, which I need to do to start figuring out how these spring shackles work. So the rear springs, which are down here, because of the way the car's set up, the car the chassis hangs from the springs. So these are the shackles and the spring will go in there. It's a bit hard to do with one hand. I do need to order the new pins for here. When I got the last lot, I only got the front ones. I didn't think I'd be this far ahead. So I just ordered the front, thinking I was working from the front of the car back. But I guess with the lockdowns and the work from home these days, it's given me a lot more time on the car. So I actually need them now. But the way this works is the rear shackle goes like that. And then of course there's another one on the front like that. And the axle sits on top of the axle and the little trunnion blocks. These mountings fit into this tube. So there needs to be a pin that comes out of there that this fits on. And then the spring mounts to that. So obviously this can rotate on the spring and the spring can rotate on the shackle. This will be the one for the other side, I think. So what I need to do is make up the pin that comes out of here that this sits on. And it's not difficult to machine it up. So I've ordered some high tensile steel bar and I'm going to machine that down. You have about 3 inches sticking into here and all one piece with the pin coming out and a nut on the end. And you have a big washer that goes on the end here that holds the shackle on. And then this is a very tight push fit into here, and you Loctite it in and then you cross drill it and you pin it through. That holds it in place. The front one will be here somewhere. This is a little bit trickier because this is on an angle. So if you look across there, you can see clearly that's on an angle. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that one yet. But I think what I'll end up doing is doing the front first, and then I'll make up a flat steel bar, kind of like a mock spring that comes forward from there to here, the exact length I need, because you need to know not only the angle of that pin, but how far out it needs to come to keep the springs parallel. So I think the way to do it is do the rears first and then figure out the front. The axle rotates in these trunnions, so they fit on there, and then you can see on the axle here there's this kind of groove, and that's where this clamps around. And it's not a tight fit, it has to be able to rotate because of the torque tube suspension. This is bolted hard onto here and it pivots way up here. So you can imagine this rear axle is going up and down in an arc. So on the springs, it needs to be able to rotate slightly, which is what these blocks do. So I'm missing the plate that goes underneath here. So if you imagine that goes on the spring like that, there's a plate on the bottom that clamps it in place. And going through the parts book, you can see that's this little butterfly plate here. And somebody on the forum measured one for me, and they are 5/16 thick. So that'll be, I think the closest I'll be able to get is 8mm plate, which is slightly thicker, I think. So that should work for these. What I'm going to do is 3D model those up, and I'm going to go and talk to one of the local engineering firms to see if I can get that plasma cut. This is the steel rear axle casing I've got. I've got all these little studs, bolts, I guess they are, soaking in the mouse milk penetrant, so I can get those out, transfer them over to the aluminium axle. You might be able to see, this one's pretty grubby, but it's got these special sort of shoulders on them, I guess. I haven't taken one of these off yet to know what they're like, but there's sort of a, you can sort of see it on that one. There's a little shoulder on there, and that looks like it fits into, I can't see because I've got this on here, but inside here there's actually a groove inside this lip. So all of those have to be lined up, so this will bolt hard onto there. I'll have to check and see if there's some sort of gasket in there. There must be some sort of, either a paper gasket or some sort of sealer, otherwise all the oil will leak out. I've pulled off the handbrake mechanism for now, and I've been going through my boxes of brake parts. I have two of these middle compensator pieces. This is where all the main pulleys are. The two of them are slightly different, but I think some of these castings are the same. So I'd previously cleaned up one, which turns out to be the wrong one. So I have the rest of the mechanism sitting here in some degreaser. This is the handbrake. Just to clean all that up, I'll clean up all the pieces and then figure out building the one best collection of parts. So I think that's all. These are the rear brake shafts. These go across the car through the back plates and pivot in there, something like that. They seem quite loose. I don't know if there's any sort of bush or anything in there, if that's just how they go, but there's all sorts of levers and things that go on the end here, and a connection point for the cable. It goes on there. I need to ring up the engineer who's got the block. He was replacing the bearings and re-white metaling the bearings to fit the new crankshaft. So I'll give him a ring during the week, see how he's getting on. He's got the flywheel as well, because that needs remachining to fit the new taper on the crankshaft. So that's the rest of the clutch mechanism there. And other than that, I think I'll go and draw up the little butterfly plates that hold those on. And there are two other little plates which I might be able to get plasma cut from some 3mm steel, although they're easy enough to make. They're little oval sort of plates. I'll probably make those by hand, which are part of the handbrake mechanism, and I've just realized they're going to be sitting in the bottom of that bucket, so I'll probably just leave those ones and make them myself. They just need to be, I think 3mm steel will do it. But it's definitely coming along. I'm still waiting for the rod end rebuild kit as well, to finish off the rod there. So now I've modeled up my little CAD file for the steel plates that need to go underneath the springs. And obviously I'm not cutting steel here, I'm just cutting a piece of cardboard. But the great thing with having a little laser cutter like this is I can test my file to make sure that the file is correct and that the plate is actually going to fit on the bottom of the trunnion there. So this is just going ahead now and cutting it out just from some thin cardboard, but that'll tell me if I've got the part right or not. And this is why I like to do a test cut, because I got this wrong. So you can see the holes don't match the studs. To get the centers accurately, when I measure this, I measure the inside of the studs and then the outside of the studs and split the difference to figure out where the center should be. Only I was off by half the width of the stud, so that's why I'm printing another one. But you can see the hole for the studs are the right size, and there's another one printing there at the moment. You can see I've got that piece of cardboard taped down. You can see on this one it didn't quite cut that top edge, and you can also see that that cut isn't very clean. And that's because when you have a big sheet of cardboard in there like that, it tends to curl up, especially with the heat from the cutting. It'll make it warp, and so if this warps when you're cutting it, it goes out of the focal point of the laser, so you end up with an unclean cut. It won't cut all the way through, which is why I've just used a smaller piece now and just taped it down to make sure it stays in the right place. So hopefully this one should be correct. So this is the second attempt with the correct dimensions, and you can see that fits over the studs nicely. And then when this is sitting on the spring, if you imagine it'll be a 5/16 8mm plate, there'll be enough thread there to get the nuts done up on the bottom of it. I think those are 7/16, which I don't have, so I'm going to have to get some 7/16 BSF bolts, nuts rather. But now I know that works, I can take that file to the metal workshop place and they should be able to plasma cut it for me.